Hi everyone, I welcome you back to our Azure Developer Communities podcast series. And today I have a very special guest for you all. So before that, I'll be just quickly giving you my introduction. I am Chavi, your podcaster of the day. And when it comes to our special guest, he is Santanu Paul. When it comes to Shantanu, what should I say? We all know TalentSprint. Who is the person who don't know? Okay, he is the founder and CEO, and also he's the managing director as well at TalentSprint. And let's hear about him. Okay, so hi Shantanu, how are you doing?
I'm doing well,
I'm
thank
doing
you.
well, thank you. I'm also doing great. So, first of all, I would be very happy to know about your journey, how you started everything, because talent sprint is something that we all know very well. So, let's hear something about your journey.
Thank you so much, Shavi, for inviting me to this show. Really appreciate your efforts and congratulate you for running a nice podcast. The journey, I guess, of course, has been almost 13 to 14 years. The company has been growing from strength to strength. It's quite large now. And we began with a vision of creating highly interesting software coding bootcamps for young professionals who wanted to start their career in high end programming. And then later on, we diversified into all kinds of interesting deep tech education for working professionals, for young professionals, college students, and so forth. The journey has been great. We were a venture-backed company for a long time, and then uh, in perhaps about 2 years ago, we got acquired by NSE, National Stock Exchange of India Limited. So we're now part of a much bigger corporate. But nevertheless, I think it's been a really interesting journey, and I think we are one of the pioneers in the space of deep tech education in India. So glad to be here.
That's so great to hear that. And as we know that today's conversation gonna be about DevOps, MLOps, and a lot of stuff, the technology stuff. So with that note, when it comes to these digital learnings and these amazing emerging technologies, so what's your point of view on these digital learning that are emerging day by day, and how people and especially the young developers are taking benefit of these digital e-learning?
Great question. In fact, I think it's like it used to be the case up to 10 years ago, I suppose, that when somebody came out of college and started working in a company, the assumption was that once I start working, my learning stops and my working begins. I think that picture has now changed. I think we continue to learn as long as we work. The idea of lifelong learning has pretty much taken root, especially among knowledge workers. So if you're a knowledge worker working in technology, consulting, banking, financial services, what have you, if your work involves a lot of critical thinking, analytical reasoning, all kinds of stuff, I think you need to continuously work on investing in yourself, because technology and science and the world itself, the world of business, keeps evolving at a rapid pace. I think we all know that the change, the pace at which things are changing is quite significant. So therefore, lifelong learning is now a natural companion for us. So the question then becomes that if you are earning and working and leading a busy life, how do you kind of work learning into your overall routine, so to speak, on an ongoing basis? That's where digital learning is great, because it gives flexibility, it gives portability, mobility. You can continue to learn as you go. You can learn in small chunks. You can learn when you have time. Essentially, digital learning, unlike classroom learning, gives you the flexibility of working, learning into your life. And that's what lifelong learning is about. So I would say that by all indications, digital learning is here to stay. One can have a long debate about what's good and what's bad about digital learning, but it's something that's an irreversible change in the way we learn. And I think the pandemic, for example, has played a big role as well in accelerating digital learning. So yes, I think it's a force of the future, and I think it's going to be an incredibly important part of our lives going forward.
That was really great to hear. And as I mentioned, that our conversation will be around DevOps and MLOps. So, would love to know the evolution of DevOps from you, because as we know that it's been like 13, 14 years that you are working on Talent Sprint, and Talent Sprint has so many amazing technologies and things up. So, obviously, who would be the better person than you to know about all these emerging technologies? So tell us something about the evolution of DevOps.
Happy to do that. DevOps really is not a new thing by itself. It's an evolution of a significant amount of work that's been happening for a very long time in software engineering, right? So if you look at software engineering, this field is about how to build software efficiently and effectively, right? So if you look at historically, there are many different methods or methodologies of building software. One of the old ones used to be called the waterfall method. What that means is that there was a design phase, then there was a development phase, and there is a deployment phase, right? So three Ds of software development would be design the software, that's phase one. Then you kind of develop it, which is basically writing the code and testing it, and then you take it to the field and deploy it. So if you think of this like a left to right waterfall, the first stage of the waterfall is like you spend time on design, that could take months, even years. Then you spend the next phase in development, which would take months or years, and then you spend another bunch of time in deployment, right? Rolling it out. If you look at that whole process, it was very linear and it kind of happens slowly. So very often you would discover that by the time you hit deployment and you hit the field, 1 year has gone by and the time from design to deployment and the market has changed, the conditions have changed. Therefore, what you thought was appropriate design at the point when you started designing a year ago, by the time it hits the market and deployment, it's outdated, right? The feature is no longer relevant or that's not what the customers want anymore. So this became a problem because methodology of developing software was too slow to reflect the speed at which the markets were changing and how consumer behavior was evolving. So then the work began in saying that how do you compress all this into a much faster time frame? Like, can we do the same work in 30 days or 3 months, right? So doing it for a year. So this led to an evolution in terms of innovation in software engineering itself. And one of the examples of that evolution is something called Agile. In Agile, the whole idea was to make sure that you can build things quickly, right? Today, DevOps is the evolution of the same idea. Today, you take designers, developers, and deployment professionals. We call them Dev, which is developers, and Ops, which is operations or deployment. You take Dev people and Ops people, people who build software and people who run software. You bring them together into one group and you kind of make them collaborate intensely through the entire process. So, therefore, that is DevOps. DevOps is really nothing but a convergence of design, development, deployment, and making all that happen much, much faster, right? So that's really the logic of all of this, right? I mean, if I were to give you an example, if you are, let's say, if you like eating food and you go to a restaurant, right, and think of a kitchen where everything comes to you sequentially, right? You get one course, another course, another course, another course, and the chef first works on your item one, you get it, you eat it, and then you wait, and he makes the next one, and then you get it, you eat it, and wait, right? But imagine a kitchen where there are three chefs working concurrently, making your dish one, two, and three. So by the time it arrives at your table, it comes really fast, right? They are not wasting time waiting for the whole thing to get done. So DevOps in that sense is a convergence of the design phase, the development phase, and ops phase of software development. So that's how DevOps came into being. And today it's kind of critical because today we run very large systems. Like think of a system like Google Translate, or think of a system like Amazon Book Recommendation System, right? If you go to Google Translate, it's always available 24/7 across the world, running in multiple languages. So the system is so large, omnipresent, 24/7. You can't really do these kinds of work when you add a new feature. You can't say design, develop, deploy. You have to constantly make the innovation on the fly. We call this continuous development or continuous integration. So DevOps really reflects the way software is done today, which is high scale, high volume, high speed.
That was really very insightful, and I totally agree with the points as well. Now, as we talked about DevOps, so that was really great. Now, let's like move our conversation to MLOps. As you mentioned about DevOps, it's Dev plus operations, right? Developers and operation merging. So, how the MLOps birth came into picture? Because right now everyone is just talking about AI ML stuffs. They know what is AI/ML, but what's actually MLOps and how is it working in the present time?
So MLOps is a special case of DevOps, right? So if DevOps talks about software development in the conventional sense, that you take input data, you apply it to a software that has been written by people, and then you get results, right? So that's how historically application development worked. Software application development worked. You would take the requirements from the market or the customers, you build the software, and you give the input data, and then you get results. So for example, it's like your payroll software is a good example. So every month your payroll runs in your company, and there is a logic to how payroll is done, how much salary everybody should be paid, and then feed data around who took how much leave, who was working full time, who was working part time, what else, and then finally it spits out your, specific individual specific compensation, right? So the input data is the, attendance, etc. Software has logic and then spits out your compensation for the month, and then people get paid. That's how typically we build software application development. Payroll was written by software developers who would know the logic of payroll. Yeah. However, machine learning came as a new way of developing software. In machine learning, you don't really write the program. In machine learning, the program gets automatically generated by looking at the input data and output data. So, for example, what is machine learning? Machine learning is a way of AI where you teach the computer to build the software by looking at the results. So, for example, it's like saying, the original ML application is like if I show pictures to a computer of cats and dogs continuously for many days, and each time it tries to guess what that is, it guesses, oh, this is a dog, and yeah, you say it's a dog, and you give it feedback to the machine. Machine learns that this is how a dog looks. Sometimes you show it a cat and it says, okay, cat, and then it understands cat. But then sometimes it makes mistakes. So it'll say that, it'll look at a dog and say it's a cat, and you correct it, right? That's called supervised learning. You train the software to teach itself to detect how a cat and a dog look different. So the machine learns by looking at data. Nobody writes the code. The code gets generated, right? That's machine learning. Machine learning is different than application development because in application development, code is written by humans. In machine learning, the computer learns the code by looking at the data that you give it and the feedback you give it. That's machine learning. So now, therefore, machine learning is nothing but a subset of software engineering, of building software. It's a way of building software. So when you do application development, you talk about DevOps. But if your application development is actually not conventional application development, it is using machine learning based application development, then when you deploy those in the field, you'll have MLOps, right? So MLOps is nothing but doing DevOps for machine learning based software.
That was amazing at the same time. Now, moving with the industry thing, when it comes to trends, trends is something that is going on in a very great manner. As I mentioned, that okay, everyone is talking about AI/ML, everyone is somehow talking about DevOps at the same time in the present time. So, what are your views on these MLOps and DevOps trends? And apart from that, how actually young developers are reacting to that trends? Because somehow people are like, okay, like if these amount of people are going in AI/ML, I will also go into AI/ML. So what are your views on these trends which are currently going on of MLOps and DevOps?
Yes, I agree with you that when you're young and you're starting your career, it's easy to be tempted by what I call shiny objects, right? If something is shining, then you kind of go towards that. And today, shiny objects are more like AI machine learning. Everybody wants to chase them. I would sort of advise some caution. If you really look at DevOps, MLOps, and all of these trends, those guys, like I tried to explain to you earlier, that software engineering is a very large field. Within that, there is application development, a special kind of application development. When you do it a certain way, when you converge design, development, and deployment, you get a special field called DevOps. Within DevOps, there are subset of applications happen to be machine learning based applications, so you get MLOps. So think of like concentric circles. Software engineering, within that another circle called application development, within that another circle called DevOps, within that another circle called MLOps. So you kind of see this concentric circles, right? So think of it this way: MLOps is the smallest circle because that's the innermost circle, and software engineering is the outermost circle. It's a huge circle, right? So our observation is that if you're a young professional starting your career, you should learn software engineering first. It's like it's like saying, okay, I want to be a brain surgeon in medicine, but I will skip the MBBS and I'll go to brain surgery directly. Will it work? I don't think so, right? To be a great surgeon, you must first be a doctor. To be a great brain surgeon, you must first be a surgeon. So the point is that if I want to be a specialist in AI and machine learning, I can't jump to it because that's like jumping to brain surgery after high school. It doesn't work. You have to go through a journey of saying, I want to be a software engineer first. Within that, I want to learn application development really well. Within that, I want to learn DevOps. So your specialization happens from left to right or from the outside circle to the inner circle. So my suggestion is that if you are a young professional starting your career, learn software engineering really well. And then over time, as you mature and you graduate and you learn about how things are built, you will specialize, like any doctor would specialize, for example, right? So that's my first observation. But having said that, for working professionals with maybe 3 to 15 years experience, I'm excluding freshers by choice, DevOps and MLOps is extremely important because if you are a young professional who's been working for a few years, Going to DevOps will make you a much better professional in terms of knowing the latest way of doing things. It obviously has great impact on your career, compensation, growth, etc. So I say that it's like any other. Think of the medical analogy I just gave you. First, be a good MBBS, then be a good surgeon, then be a good specialist brain surgeon. And that is the right order, and that's how you have to go about it, right? You can't jump out of your cradle and become a brain surgeon.
That's so true, and also I really love the way you explained it in a very nice manner. So I'm pretty much sure the young developers are gonna love the advice and also will be able to understand it properly. Now, moving with one thing that is usually asked is what should be the future practices, because like what would be the future of all these things which are going on, because as we know these are still new to the people. Still people are trying to understand what is actually this ops is meant for, why we are actually mixing up this by like developer with operations, machine learning with operations. So according to you, what would be the future of this industry in terms of in terms of our development, and also in terms of the like development of the developers?
Yeah, I get your question, and I think it's actually a straightforward answer because if you look at how these words stack up, right? Dev plus ops equal to DevOps. DevOps for machine learning is MLOps, correct? So if you are really somebody who wants to be a great professional in the field of software development, software engineering, your first goal is to really become a great programmer, which means you can write good code. That itself is not easy. Then you have to learn how to be a good software engineer, which is you learn to build code. So you're a developer. First, you learn to be a developer. Then you learn to be a developer who can deploy your applications in the field. So that's why you learn ops. So now, if you have learned how to build code and deploy code, you have learned the dev and ops separately. But now, if you learn DevOps after that, you can relate to the fact that you know dev and you know ops, and this together, this DevOps field makes sense, right? So the way to develop your skill set is to say that, look, let me first be a great, developer, software developer, then a great software engineer, then learn DevOps, and then learn MLOps. The good news here is that all of this is here to stay, right? These are not fleeting, short-term things. The world is changing. AI and machine learning is going to be fundamental to the future of all software development. However, just because that's the future doesn't mean you can jump to it straight away. You need to go through a standard process of how to learn. Correct? Just like you can't learn engineering before you learn physics. It doesn't make sense. Correct? So you have to learn physics in high school, you have to learn some calculus, and then you can actually go to mechanical engineering and actually learn something. Otherwise, if you say, I'm in class 8, why should I learn all this? Let me jump to mechanical engineering straight away. It doesn't work. It doesn't give you the foundation for proper learning. So I would say that the good news is that these are going to be fantastic careers for people, but you need to kind of go about it in the right, thoughtful manner. And essentially, if you do it in the right order, it's going to be an amazing career for anybody who does that.
That was insightful. And also, just one more thing I wanted to know from you is like, what's the if I talk about DevOps precisely, then in that case, like when it comes to content, okay, like when it comes to the content which is present online, which is like easily available, in that case, how would you keep it in this way, like if I'm a DevOps engineer and I want to start my content journey in that, would it be successful? Like, will DevOps be there after 20-30 years as well in the industry?
Yes, like I said in my previous response, I think DevOps and MLOps will be here for a very long time. So don't worry about whether this will last. The problem is that by learning yourself, self-learning by going on a video on, let's say, YouTube, will you be able to learn? I don't think so. It's like saying, if I watch somebody playing a violin on YouTube, I'll become a violinist. If I watch it longer, I'll become an even better violinist. Or if I watch Olympic swimming every day for the rest of my life on YouTube, I'll become a great swimmer. It won't happen. To be a good violinist and a good swimmer, you have to either pick up a violin or you have to actually jump into the pool. Correct? So, but on the other hand, you might be able to clear a multiple choice examination by watching something. So we believe that watching is not learning, doing is learning. So the whole programs that we have, and both in, for example, when DevOps, we have partnered with Carnegie Mellon University, which is one of the top ranked schools in the world. In MLOps, we are partnered with ISC Bangalore, which is the number one ranked university in India. So the programs we offer are from top academic brands, created in partnership with them, which have very strong emphasis on learning by doing, or what we now call experiential learning. So a lot of the learning that you have to do is first the theory and the concepts, but very quickly, a lot of assignments, a lot of projects, a lot of hands-on learning. Right? For example, you are a podcaster. If you never actually did podcasting, you just read about podcasting, could you become a podcaster? I don't think so. So some things you learn by doing, and I think DevOps and MLOps are exactly those kinds of things. You can't learn them by watching a video. You learn them by doing and applying and building things, building software and deploying software using these techniques.
That was great. And also, what would be the career opportunities that goes into these both things? In case of both, I wanted to know in the case of Indian perspective and also in the foreign perspective.
I believe, and again, I'm not some expert who knows the answer to every question, but I personally believe that if somebody is a good software engineer who has learned DevOps and within DevOps learned MLOps, I think the market value is going to be enormous. They will be in the top 1% of the IT profession, right? However, if you do it just for the sake of the hype, if you do it just for, okay, I'm not a good software engineer, but I want to be a DevOps person, then you will be like, any other person who sort of is following the hype and not building the competency. So I actually believe that the problem is not going to be that the careers will vanish. The problem is going to be more likely that we will not have the patience to teach ourselves these things well. So we'll kind of arrive half baked. And one of the most important things about effective learning is that your resilience, right? That tomorrow if DevOps evolves into a new field, let's say the future of DevOps is something called X. I don't know what X is. X might appear after 5 years. But if my DevOps skills are really, really strong and I can apply them experientially, I can build things with it, then when DevOps becomes X, I can become an X professional too very quickly. But if my knowledge of DevOps is very weak, then it doesn't matter what DevOps becomes. I'll always remain a weak DevOps engineer and certainly not a very effective engineer for X when X happens. So I always say that, focus on the competency, focus on building oneself. Don't focus on the label. The label is going to be something that will get attached to you as you go. So the labels keep changing, technology evolves. But your competency being able to say that, okay, I can write great programs, I can deploy software, I can design software. Those are the things. So I always say that good learning is about verbs. Design, develop, deploy. These are verbs, right? If you're strong in the verbs, the nouns will take care of themselves. So DevOps, MLOps is like physics, chemistry, math, right? Can you solve a hard problem in physics? Solving is the competency. Physics is not the competence.
Again, like it's I totally love the way you explain this stuff in a very easy and a very simple crux manner. Now I would be very happy to conclude this podcast with the three learnings that you have got in, obviously, like talking about the top three learning is a very difficult task when you have the experience of 13 to 14 experience in a company. But yeah, I would love to know any three learnings that you have received till now.
No, it's a very tough question to answer, but I'll try my best. In many ways, I think you realize that if you're building a tech company, in our case, an edtech company, then it's important to actually appreciate that you need both technical knowledge and domain knowledge, right? I came from a background in technology, but I had to teach myself the domain of education. So I always say that if you are a professional who knows your tech and you know your domains, that intersection of technology skill and domain skill is very powerful. It's much more powerful. It's like 1 plus 1 equal to 11, right? So I always say that as a professional, invest in your knowledge in technology and in domain. Very important. The second thing I'll say is that, don't think of tech career only because it makes money. You must really build some extraordinary software. I believe that this field encourages people creating nice things, creating great software. So I would say that if you build the capability, the money will come. If you chase the money, the capability may not come. So get your priorities right. It's very important to have that. And third thing I'll say is that India is a great platform today because we are going through a great exercise in nation building, and a lot of interesting things are happening. Like for example, who would have believed that 10 years ago that we have something called UPI, Unified Payment Interface, which is through which we pay money, and that's like everybody in the world talks about it because the first API out of India, where everybody in the world, including Silicon Valley companies, keep praising it and raving about it. If you read the some of the articles, in the Federal Reserve in US, somebody has written that the US should adopt UPI as a way of doing payments effectively. So countries going through nation building, great amount of innovation. So I would say that don't think of pursuing jobs, think of pursuing a career, and engage in nation building.
Thank you so much for such an amazing insights. And as I mentioned, I know it was difficult to mention the three, but yeah, I love the way you mentioned it in a very great manner. So with that note, thank you so much, Shantanu, for joining in. And it was really great having you to explore about DevOps and MLOps, and the experience was fabulous. So with that note, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.